This is your CEO assessment tip. Today we're talking about the top 5 red flags to look for. If your CEO says any of these, it is an area of concern for you. You may either have to dig deeper or just disqualify the candidate. Number 1, you ask the CEO for their financial performance, their financial results. The CEO responds by stating their performance in EBITDA. We're performing very well, our EBITDA is up by 30%. That's a big red flag for me right away. I want to ask myself, why is the CEO stating their performance in terms of EBITDA? Generally, it's because they have over-leveraged the business, they have a very expensive debt, their interest expense is out of control, and they are depreciating and amortizing a lot of their assets and capital expenditures. So the CEO has probably invested heavily in buying assets and has a lot of debt. Then they will use EBITDA to try to make it look like they're performing well or that their business is profitable, and that once they pay, hey, once we pay this debt off and we have these assets paid off, our business is going to be in great shape. It's not necessarily the case. If you are performing well and you have very strong financial results, you will state your results in terms of net profit or operating profit. Second red flag is if the CEO does not know the profitability of their business units. So for example, if you take a hospital, the CEO of the hospital, they might have cardiology, they may have ophthalmology, they may have radiology. And if the CEO does not know the profitability of each department, it's a red flag that perhaps the hospital is known for cardiology, that CEO is taking the profits from their most profitable department. The CEO has started an eye clinic, the eye clinic is losing money, and he's paying for the loss-making departments from the cash revenue generating department. This has a lot of issues with it versus a CEO who's really focused on driving peak performance. They would then tell you, yes, my eye clinic is losing money, but I'm either working to divest that clinic or we're going to optimize it over the next 12 months. The third red flag is when you're looking at the history or the historic performance of your CEO and you realize that in the last job, the CEO left the company at the same time the CFO left. If a CEO and a CFO leave at the same time, that's a big red flag because a board generally will want to avoid that at all costs because it's too much of a leadership change. It creates too much destabilization that you have your two most senior people leaving at the same time. Usually that only happens when there is questionable transactions taking place. I don't want to go as far as saying there is a fraud, but it's a good indication or a good red flag that a fraud may have taken place, that the board had made the difficult decision of letting both the CEO and the CFO go at the same time. Whenever you see that kind of movement taking place, you really need to go and take a much deeper dive into what happened at that organization, what happened on that P&L, were there any questionable transactions, was there a forensic audit then took place, who is their auditor, what kind of audit activities have taken place, was there issues with the reporting, etc. The fourth red flag in your CEO interview is when the CEO is failing to give you details. So when you want to go into extreme detail, so for example, if the CEO says, yes, I started up a chip factory, then you say, great, what capital structure did you use, how much gearing did you use, who is the bank that provided the debt facility, who is the banker, what was his personality like, when he came to see you, what was he wearing, what actually took place, where did the meeting take place, the first time you met the banker, where did you meet them? These seem like very silly questions, but the CEO all of a sudden who throttles back and is unable to go into extreme detail of these transactions, what are the core 3 milestone transactions that the CEO was involved in, and then go into extreme details on those. When the CEO backs off on giving you detail, it's a red flag that they weren't leading the transaction. Often the chairperson can be the one who's leading that transaction, who's actually going in and deciding what the gearing is, what the capital structure is. He will then, or she will dictate to the CEO, hey, by the way, we're going to open a manufacturing plant here in the region. Here's $10 million for it. So the structure and everything else is being handed to them. Or if they're working in a multinational, they'll have an M&A team. They'll have different teams that will then dictate to the CEO. The CEO is then tactically executing. So failure to provide detail is another red flag, And you don't want to push it too much in the interview. You could probably upset the CEO or make them feel small. You just want to red flag it and say, oh, well, I'm starting to suspect that this person did not lead the transaction, because you can't talk about it in detail. The fifth red flag that you want to look for is whenever a CEO starts a business and then leaves. So say, for example, I'm working for a multinational, we launched a new juice flavor, or we launched a new product line, we launched a new chips, or we launched a new whatever it is, dish soap. We never had dish soap before. We launched it. I created a manufacturing facility. I created the marketing, the branding, the go-to-market strategy, and we launched that product. And then after 2 years, it was running profitably. It was doing great, and I left. They left their company 2 years ago, and the last thing they did in the last 2 years they were in the company was start this business. So they started the business 4 years ago. After it was running for 2 years, they left. Now you're interviewing them 2 years after they left, and then you ask them, how is that business unit performing well? Then they say, when I was there, we were really profitable, we did great. I haven't really kept track of it. I don't know how they're doing now. Bingo, now you've got a problem. I guarantee you that this is a major red flag, because nobody goes through that emotional experience of creating a business line, creating a product, creating a brand, launching it. Firstly, then you leave. Why would you leave if it was profitable and it was doing great? That's your baby, that's your creation. And number two, there's no way that you don't know what happened. We're all in the market. We know what's going on at our competitor organizations. You know, especially at the CEO level, because you're having dinners, you're having meetings, you're connected. The person starts the business. It takes 1 year to get things up and running. They deploy the capital expenditure goes into the business. They buy the manufacturing lines, or they buy all the expenses that go into that. And those expenses are capitalized, amortized over time. And then they book revenue, they book their first bunch of sales. They will then quote to say, hey, we were profitable in the first 6 months. That revenue is not realized. I mean, the cash, from an accounting perspective, maybe they have realized the revenue once those invoices go out, but the cash does not come in. And in the third and fourth year, product is going bad, so you have inventory losses, you have customers which are not paying invoices, you have customers which are returning product, and all of that needs to be provisioned. The CEO is sitting at the helm. He starts to see, or she starts to see, that this business is really not going to hit the cash flow projections that the business plan had. They can start to see that the roof is going to cave in, and they leave. That's why you leave. When you start a business, you start a new business line, a new product line, and after 24 months you leave. That's generally the reason why, is that the CEO and the CFO can see before anyone else that this bird is probably not going to fly. So that's a big red flag. They start a business line, start a new product launch, and then they leave. Red flag on the plate. Those are a few questions you can use to catch a CEO off balance. If you like those, you could pick up our book, CEO Assessment and Selection, which has over 400 questions that you can use in your CEO interviews. Also, on our book page, you can download a free sample of the book, and you can get a link to our book page in the description of this video.